Welcome back to another episode of the Elite Selling Podcast. We've got a special guest for you today. We've got Kelly Breslin Wright, who is the founder and CEO of Culture Driven Sales. Before that, she was the president and COO over at a little company you've probably heard of called Gong. And before that, she was a CRO at Tableau. She's also a speaker, a professor, and we're going to get into it today. I'm very excited for you to listen to this episode. We're going to go deep on what it takes and the ingredients to supercharge your sales career. We're covering topics from prospecting into C-levels to how to advance your career and do it the right way, to how to lead with integrity and lead with intention throughout your career and in your sales profession. So you're not going to want to miss this episode. It's really, really good. Get your notebook, get your phone out for taking notes. It's going to be a great episode with a lot of key takeaways. So without further ado, let's get into it. Kelly, welcome to the Elite Selling Podcast. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Frankie. I'm so excited to be here.
I know, this is going to be a great one.
Selling.
We're going to be talking about the ingredients of what it takes to be an elite seller, to supercharge your sales career. It's going to be awesome. When we were prepping for this, we're going to cover many different topics just based on your experience as several-time CRO, sales leader, board member. So it's going to be really good. So thanks for being here.
Well, thanks for having me.
I love it. So pipeline's down. It's 2024. It's August. People have been on vacation for what seems like a year now, especially if you're selling into EMEA, APJ, or some of those across the pond. And I guess just selfishly, I need to build more pipeline, and I'm sure a lot of other reps do. But you've been a CRO, you've been a buyer many times over, you've bought software, I'm sure, many times. So I'm curious, what are some of the things that stand out when getting cold outreach or even warm outreach? Can you share a little bit about what those best practices look like?
Yeah, well, Frankie, I think right now everyone's talking about pipeline, especially for those many listeners who are probably in tech, because it is hard to be in technology sales right now. There's a lot of companies are not spending tons. There's churn going on. It's hard to reach. People don't have as many people, and so it's hard to get those execs, and everyone is strapped for time and everyone is strapped for money. So when I talk to folks, everyone is talking about pipeline. And so maybe when we talk about what are the right things to do for pipeline, let's talk first about what are the challenging part of reaching out to a CRO or a president or a CEO or any exec, even a sales director, a sales manager. And just to give a little bit of context. So I was head of sales, effectively CRO at Tableau for almost 12 years. I was running sales and go-to-market at Gong. I've been in go-to-market on many different boards, etc. And what I have found is people call me literally all the time. Calls, emails, LinkedIn, not too much snail mail. There used to be a lot of snail mail, but whatever way they can contact me, they're contacting me. And guess, Frankie, how many of those I respond to?
1% at best?
I'm guessing it's even less than that.
Even less.
So I think the thing is, everyone is always saying, hey, make your 40, 50, 60 calls a day, do all of your outreach. And that's what everyone's doing. And you do have to play law of averages. It's really important. But you have to make those law of averages and you have to make that outreach count. And so how is it going to be when you're doing all that outreach that your outreach is what is going to actually be answered or responded to? And so a few things just to think about. Many people want to go really high. They say instead of going to a sales manager or a sales director or whoever the regional leader, they want to go straight for the CRO or the CEO. And those people are really, really, really busy. So it's okay to go to them, but what is it going to take for them to actually respond? Because when I was president and COO of Gong, I don't even know how many I'd get a day. Like usually 5 would be a low day, 5, 10, 20 outreaches a day. And I will tell you, if it was not a known phone number, I answered it 0% of time. I responded and called back voicemails less than 2% of time. I responded to emails almost never. And so that can make people can hear that and go, oh my gosh, I'm doing all this work. So why am I doing all this work? How am I going to get someone to respond? So here are some practical tips that people can do that will maybe help you with your outreach. The first is, who are you going to outreach to? If you're going to do outreach, you're probably more likely to get a response from the person who will be an influencer or a champion than the actual ultimate decision maker, unless there are some really compelling reasons that that person's going to respond to you. We'll get to that in a minute. So who's the sales manager? Who's the sales director? Who's the one that actually is facing the problem? The CRO and the CEO, their team is facing the problem, but they may not, unless it's a very strategic thing. So that's something to think about. How are you going to do outreach? And then the second is, how are you actually doing that outreach? So mistake. Most outreach is terrible.
Mm-hmm.
Not even like mediocre or bad. It's terrible. It's like sentences of, hi, Kelly, I am from this vendor and I want to sell you this because our product is the best for all these reasons. And it says it's very vendor centric, and it only talks about the company. So if you're going to get the attention of folks, how can you get the attention? By talking about them and talking about what is important to that individual and the company instead of you. I don't care what the vendor's is.
Yeah, no, I'm keep going. This is good. This is good.
Okay, so a couple tips. Think about it this way. When people are preparing for a sales call, let's say you got the meeting. When people prepare for the call, they're so prepared, or
Yes.
a good salesperson's prepared. They know who's going to be in the room. They know what the agenda is. They've often sent the agenda ahead of time. They've put together timing for what are you going to spend. They know what their goal is to come out of the meeting, what the next step should be. How much effort do people give for that outreach? To try to get the meeting. Oftentimes people are just using the same thing, putting it together.
Yeah.
And they're saying, hey, I'm not going to actually focus on learning much about the person I'm reaching out to unless I get the meeting. But
So can we talk about that a little bit?
Yeah,
So,
because you're not going to get the meeting if you don't know anything about the person.
100%, and I completely agree. I think there's this challenge, and it depends on what organization you're in, but where it's like the volume, whether you're using SalesLoft, Outreach, or anything that tracks your emails or calls, where, to one of your points earlier, you need to play the numbers game.
Absolutely.
So sometimes we over-rotate and do that and don't think about, okay, what is Kelly going to respond to? What is Kelly focus on? What are some of the initiatives she's working on? What might be some of the people that are underneath her that could go influence her? And I think it's this balance of, depending on if you're selling, in strat or enterprise versus commercial or SMB where you need more volume, how would you tell your team to balance that? Because you don't want to be super low on the leaderboard and your manager comes to you and like, hey, Frankie, you haven't done any outreach in a long time. Yeah. But then you come back to them and say, well, I'm doing a lot of research. Like, you don't want to be on that other end too.
So I've seen reps that have done that too. You don't want to overpay, and then you almost become paralyzed because no one's making any calls. They're doing hours and hours of research. There's not tons of research that you need. So let's talk about, there's a few things. How do you know enough information that you can personalize the outreach, which is something that is compelling and interesting to the individual you're reaching out to and relevant for the company that they're doing? That's first. And the second is, how can you do it in a creative way so that you can stand out across from all the rest of the huge outbounds that they are getting every day, or inbounds to them? So a couple things. One is, when I respond, well, I'll give you a couple examples of where I've seen reps do it really well and a few examples of where I have responded. At Tableau, every time we released a new product or had a new big feature, or we were trying to draw execs to a roadshow or some kind of a key event, we would actually give a list of 5 to 15 of these execs to every executive at Tableau. So the Tableau execs were doing the outreach to the other execs. And then there was a bit more, like they would get, they'd get an Excel spreadsheet or a Google sheet or some kind of note that'll say, here are the couple things that are really important to them. And so they can personalize it because execs like to get some outreach from other execs.
Right.
Now, at the same time, though, you have to be careful not to over pivot on this because I've seen companies where they're like, the SDR and the reps don't want to do any outreach. They want the CEO to do everything.
Yes.
Yeah, and then, they have to, the CEO and the CRO and the CMO have to have jobs to run.
Yeah.
And so you have to be thinking about ways that you can do this in a scalable way where you're not just going to be dependent on execs reaching out to execs. But that's one good way to do. The second is how can you personalize and be able to do things in a way where it's actually different. So as I said, I'm getting email, voicemail. It's all about the vendor, all about the vendor. I don't care. I usually don't even listen. And if you realize, like, attention getter, it happens in the first 15 to 30 seconds. So how can you get someone's attention right away that they're actually going to read the email or they're going to listen? So a few examples of what I've seen done really well. There was this one rep that we had at Tableau who was actually ran this for his entire career, and he had this program that he called the Book and Note program, and he had about 5 different books that were all about selling or improving the benefit at a company. There were different books that he had, and then he actually developed this cartoon that nobody had seen before. It was, kind of like an animated cartoon about sales. And he had these note cards made that were these funny personalized note cards about sales. And he would listen, do a little bit of research, didn't take that long, just a little bit of research on whoever he was reaching out to. It wasn't always an exec, could be a sales leader, sales manager. And he wrote an actual personalized note, inserted it in the book and said, hey, based on what I read in this article, it seems like this book might be something that you'd enjoy. And he'd actually put that in snail mail. And he had a phenomenal response rate because how many people are actually getting snail mail these days?
Yeah.
And if it's snail mail, it's a personalized note. It has some interesting stuff on it. It included a book. Now, Gong also used this kind of approach and had a piñata. And it basically sent folks these piñatas. This was before I came on board, so I can take no credit for it. Our CMO was amazing at coming up with cool, different ideas. And it wasn't gimmicky. It was, hey, here's a piñata. People open it up and go, what's this piñata? Inside there's some Gong swag, and it says, we want to help you to, whatever the campaign was, get more leads. And people would call back on that. So that's another idea. A third way, and I love this story, is when I was at Gong, I got all these emails and calls I didn't answer. I started getting videos, but most of the videos were all about the vendor. So I got this one video. It was very short and sweet, and it talked about what the rep was selling, but also had said, hey, Kelly, I look at you on LinkedIn. I really like these articles. I appreciate you posting things that are very helpful to the sales community. Mentioned a few things that were important to Gong. And the whole video was very short. It was about a minute. It was very personalized. It was casual. It wasn't like over the top selling. And at the end, he said, would love to have some time with you. I responded and said, I have no interest in what you're selling, but I really appreciated your outreach. It was personalized, it was creative, it was short, it was catchy, it had personalized stuff about me. So I'm not interested in what you're selling, but curious if you'd be interested in a role at Gong because we're hiring. And he immediately responded and said, yes, I'd be interested. And 3 weeks later, he was hired at Gong, and here we are 3 years or 2.5 years later, and he's still there. So outreach.
Reverse Uno on him. Is this the guy we were talking about before we prepped that just got promoted? Is same person or different guy?
Yes, I think he did just get promoted. So I'll do a call out for Daniel McKella, and he had great outreach, and it served.
Shout out to Daniel.
Yeah.
I hear, and I'm guilty of it too, and I'm going to call myself out. I woke up this morning right before the gym, bad habit, but opened up my phone, immediately checked my email, like right when I got up. And I got a auto reply from an email that I had sent out last week that was scheduled to go send out. And I like opened it and I thought it was from somebody else. And I read the subject line, read the first sentence, and I was like, oh, this is such a stupid email. Who would send this? And I realized it was from me. Oh, I gotta work on this a little bit more. So I'm glad we're talking today. It's one thing I've heard is just it's so important to do the things that don't scale, especially now, where if you can go figure out a way, like that example you had of the person that would put a note in the book or send personalized video messages or send the pinatas, like find a way to programatize those types of campaigns, because those are things that people aren't doing, because you can't sit down and write 100 emails in an hour. You got to think about who you're going to send it to. You got to use your brain and write out a thoughtful note, use your brain, put together a thoughtful video that's 60 seconds or less. So I love that we're talking about this. It's this really interesting balance of the opportunity is there just because email has gotten so flooded, but people aren't doing what you just talked about.
Yeah, but so volume is still really
It
important.
is.
So you have to, sales is so much about law of
Yeah.
averages. So it should not be something where you have to go read a whole bunch of annual reports and go do all this research, but you should do a quick Google on the person's name, look at their LinkedIn, see what their hobbies are, see if they've written any articles or done any quotes lately. Like 5 minutes and you
Yeah.
can have way more information, but most people spend 0 minutes or 0 seconds.
Yeah.
And they just take their template and they just send exactly the same thing to everyone. And the person receiving it knows it's a template and
Totally.
probably not even sent from you. It's probably sent from some mass email program.
Yeah. One last thing on pipeline generation before we shift gears, because I think a thing that people miss, and I used to miss it and still do sometimes, is we can spend that time researching and send a perfect note, send a perfect video, do the handwritten note, but somebody might not respond because either they're out of office, they're busy, they've got other priorities. Like you said, you're busy. So what's your take on like persistence and follow up and doing that personalized touch every single time?
Yeah.
Just if you could talk about that real quickly.
Okay, well, so the personalized touch, I mean, many different hits is what ends up getting someone to respond, right?
Yes.
So you do have to be persistent, but you also want to be careful that you're not like hitting and calling the person every day or every week, because then that can just be an irritant. So persistence is good, but you have to make sure that you're not being overly aggressive. One other thing, though, to go back to what is the most effective way to do outreach. So I'll tell you, there's really only one time that I will always respond, or almost always respond. And that is, it didn't matter when I was a manager, director, VP, CRO, board director, whatever it is. If someone I know who's a first degree of separation, someone that worked for me, worked with me, someone that is a very close confidant, someone who I highly respect, says, hey, Kelly, you have got to talk to this company. Like, this company changed how we do work. You really need to invest the time. Then I almost always will respond. Now, that does not include, I have people that I literally have not seen for 20 years. I worked for them 20 years ago, or they were in my freshman dorm or whatever, and they'll reach out and I don't have any relationship with them anymore. And they say, oh, someone saw that I'm connected with you here. That's not very effective.
Yeah.
Someone's just digging for a way to get close to me. But someone that actually is very close is helpful. So this whole being able to use, whether it's LinkedIn Sales Navigator or be able to ask people in your company who knows who, is very effective, because the higher up you go, you're going to respond to those people who are in your inner circle, not just those on your outer circle. And so you should think about that. If you can get to someone with someone that they're close to, that's very helpful.
So you don't respond to college suite mates, roommates, anything like that. It's got to be someone you worked with, someone close.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that people will look and say, hey, I saw you're connected
Right.
to this person. I don't know how you're connected. If I'm close friends with them, then I might be a good, good venue. But also sometimes I'm not even involved in a company, and
Mm.
people will say, hey, Kelly, I see you're connected. Can you help to connect me? If I have no relationship with the company, me connecting someone I haven't talked to for 10 years with a rep from a company, it's not very authentic. So that
No.
doesn't work very
I
effectively.
think I think it does more harm than good. So it's important to do that second layer. So I think the theme of this first topic, and I want to get to the next one, is it doesn't take much time to do your research, but not many people are doing it. So take 5 minutes, like you said, just to go find something personal, make it authentic, make it real, and go get that volume out there and scale the unscalable.
You got
So
it, Frankie? I agree.
so next topic here, Kelly. So you've been a part of so many different people's journeys, to like that example you had of hiring somebody, to seeing people get promoted, to seeing people rise up the ranks in the corporate ladder. And I'm curious, kind of same theme as last time. What's the wrong way and right way to go about getting promoted? There's a lot of listeners here that are maybe mid-market. They want to get an enterprise. Enterprise wants to get to strat, things of that nature, maybe even the leadership. So what are some of the wrong ways to go about getting promoted, and what's the right way to do it?
Yeah, great question, Frankie. The interesting thing is, it seems to me each year it even gets more and more that these new reps or existing reps, it doesn't matter if they're an SDR, an inside rep, an enterprise rep, someone wanting to go from inside to enterprise, or an SDR wants to become a rep, or a rep wants to become a manager, whatever it is. Everyone is so focused on what is the fastest way that I can make more money, get a bigger title, and be promoted. And that is how people tend to measure their own success. And I think, in some ways, we as leaders in the companies have kind of helped to make that, because that's what everyone's always thinking of. Because what people didn't know what it was, and so now there's different career ladders, and then people want to say, well, I want to game the system with the ladder. I want to be the fastest person to climb the ladder. And so I will just ask people, just think for a second. Why is it that you're in such a rush?
Mm.
Why are you in such a rush? Because this is what I will ask you to think. We all have seen reps that they're fantastic, SDRs too. They're fantastic at their role. They've nailed the role, but they don't know tons about what's going to help them. They don't have the skill set to help them be successful in the next role, whether it's an SDR being a commercial rep, or a commercial rep being an enterprise rep, or a rep becoming a manager. There's different skill sets. And they've nailed their existing one, and then they want to get promoted so quickly. They push to get promoted, and then they're promoted potentially too early. And what happens?
Yeah.
What happens?
Failure. Yeah.
What
You don't hit the
happens?
number, you're miserable, it's not good, you get fired, lots of bad things.
Yeah, so oftentimes people are so in a rush that they end up getting promoted or asking to be promoted before they're ready. And then you take a superstar at one level, and they actually are not a superstar. In fact, they could be a failure at the net, or fail, not be a failure, but they'll
Yeah,
fail
yeah.
at the next level. So the first is, don't be in such a rush. So here are the ways I think people can help to really supercharge their career, to help them to be ready to not only progress faster, but to be successful when they go to the next level. So a few tactical things, and if people want to write it down. Number one, If you're interested in being promoted to the next level, you need to fully understand what are the skills that are going to make you very successful at that next level. And then you should ask your manager, you should ask your peers, you should ask top performers at that next level, hey, what is it that I'm missing? What are my gaps of where I need to develop to make sure that I already have that skill? Oftentimes people want to be promoted to that and then develop the skill once they're in seat. And you can do that. There's nothing wrong with doing it, but think about how much faster you'll go if you've already done some of that before. So for instance, if you are a rep trying to be a manager, what are you doing to help mentor some of the newer hires? How are you helping to onboard them? How are you helping to role play with them? Are you jumping on calls with them or listening to their calls and then giving them some tips? Are you able to actually do some role playing of how you would up level a person if they were a rep? So how are you getting those skills before you're in seat? So that is number one.
That's great.
Number two is raise your hand. So what do I mean by this? Oftentimes people are like, I want to be promoted, I want to be promoted, I want to be promoted, I want to be promoted. And it's like, I get so sick of hearing it. Every time they come to me, they want to be promoted. But are they going out of their way to be a company builder and help do things that are going to make them, their team, and the company more successful? Or they just complain? And so those complainers are not going to get promoted, because so that's on its own.
Yeah.
But I will pretty much I'll put on the promotion track those people that raise their hand. So let's say there is some project that nobody has time to do, but is needed to be done for the team. And there's a rep that has nothing to do with that person's job, but he or she says, I would love to take on this project. It seems like it would be helpful to do this research project. Or they say, it would be useful to have this competitive benchmarking and no one's able to do it. And they just go out of their way to create something that is of value, not only to themselves, but to the whole team. And that person that just proactively raises their hand will be able to be much more effective. So that's
Totally agree.
Second idea. Third idea, and then I'll stop at 3, is there are many people who want to be promoted. They're always asking for time. Like they say, I have people call me all the time. Hey, Kelly, will you be my mentor? I often don't even know who they are. Like they're just calling me randomly. Will you be my mentor? Will you be my coach? But even within a company, will you be my mentor? Will you do this? And then oftentimes people don't have time, but if they do have time, because most people want to be helpful, they'll show up for this call or this meeting or this walk or a lunch or whatever, and the rep or the SDR or the manager, whoever it is, comes and says, I'd love to pick your brain. Tell me everything you can know.
Dagger to the heart.
And it's like literally you just asked for a meeting with me.
Yeah.
You don't have an agenda. So the people that do that the best are the people that say, hey, Kelly, I really want to learn how to get all the skills to be an enterprise rep so I can be promoted from an inside rep to a field rep. And I just want 15 minutes of your time. And I'm going to send you an agenda. And so ahead of the meeting, I get an agenda. I want to talk about these 3 topics. And here are the 3 questions. And then they come to the meeting. They're in control, just like a sales call. They have their agenda. They have their meeting. They say, here are the 3 things I want to know. They ask me those 3. They say, well, how can I practice it? At the end of the meeting, they keep it to 15 minutes or 30 minutes. They send me a thank you note. They give me some follow-up about what they're doing. And then once they're done and they've actually been successful with all that, they'll keep me appraised. Hey, you asked me to do these, or you suggested I do these things. I did them. I think it's working. I now have some follow-up questions. I want to follow up with you on 1 or 2. So they take control of their career, but they manage it just like a sales call. So you'll see a pattern here. Who's prepared for the prospecting? Who's prepared for what they need to turbocharge their career for the promotion, and then who's prepared, of course, for the sales call. You need to be prepared in the same way for each.
Yeah. Yeah, my manager talks about treating every interaction, every meeting as $1 million opportunity because you never know who's going to be on the other end. And just because maybe you work at the same company as your executive or your boss or whoever you're trying to get time with, doesn't mean you should take that lightly. It's an opportunity for you to show that, to your point, that you are prepared, that you do want to get into the next role, and that you're adding value. So I guess to sum up this section, couple things: slow down to speed up, really take the time to invest and ask questions of what is it going to take to be that to get that next role. And then because of that, you're going to be able to add value along the way, and making sure that every single time, every single interaction, whether you're in the seat or not, you're contributing, you're going above and beyond, you're doing things outside of the role, and you're not just thinking about yourself, but you're thinking about others. So such a good section there.
Yeah, be intentional, focus on the team and the company, and don't be all about me, me, me. Because
Yes.
many reps are all me, 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 and then they want to be promoted. And it doesn't totally make sense. It's not the
Yeah.
right mindset.
Sounds just like the first point about the emails, right? I, my vendor, my technology, my product versus how can I help you? So it's like there's a common theme in sales that
There
doesn't go
is.
away.
Frankie, here's the thing that's so funny. When people ask me about turbocharging their career progression,
Yeah.
promotions, all of that,
Yeah.
they're always thinking, me, 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 how do I do this? And that's important. You should be thinking about, because you are in control of your own career. You should be the one thinking about how can you lead your career in the way that you want. But at the same time, if you're intentional about it, you need to be thinking about how can you help solve other people's problems? How can you help a team be more effective? How can you help by putting the needs of the organization in your front of your mind, rather than doing things vendor-centric, self-centric? And you need to think about how to be prepared for all of those meetings in the same way. So
Hmm.
when you think about selling, people are so focused on how do I sell the product or service at my company. But if you're doing career progression, or you're doing an interview, or you're having a meeting about a performance review, that is your biggest interview, because
Right.
you are the product, and you are basically putting together this whole sales pitch about what it's going to take to get you on the right track. And so people need to be as intentional about that, and they think about what they want. It's more important, but they invest less time and thinking and intentionality in that than everything else. And there should be quite a bit thought through in terms of managing your career.
Yeah, and I just think I love this topic because I think the people that stand out, like take sales out of it, just in general, the people that you look up to or that you're inspired by, they're the people that have a game plan, that are intentional, that show up and know exactly what they want to put into the day, know what they want to put into the week, and know how they want to contribute to other people along the way. And I think that, I don't know, it's just the world we live in. It's always, okay, how can I get that promotion? How can I close this deal? How can I do that? But it's maybe it's a little bit of a, I don't know, fancy word, or not word, but what am I trying to say here? It just takes intention, right? And if you put being intentional, like that's going to solve 99% of your problems.
Absolutely. That's
So thanks for letting me get a little philosophical there as I couldn't put together my words, Kelly.
Oh, no, it sounded great. It sounded great. I totally agree.
So thinking about, I guess, shifting a little bit more selfish here, if you do want to leave your role or switch roles, or it's time to make a change and you're starting to look for other jobs or other career opportunities, I've worked at companies that are 75,000 people, at companies like Cisco. I've worked at 14-person startups. So I definitely have my opinion on, what fits, what doesn't fit. But I'm curious what people should look for when they're going after their next role, especially if we put our lens in the 2024 era that we're in today.
Well, it's funny because people ask, what should they look for? Like there's some universal
Yeah.
answer. And I think what we all need to consider is that we, just like each company has its own mission and vision, we can talk about that too, and core values. Each of us individually have our own set of values and our own priorities for what we want to achieve in our career. So I think the first thing is, just because everyone else is running towards that company doesn't mean that that company is going to be the best fit for you. So you have to actually put on your own lens of what is it that you're looking for and what are you trying to do. So what I will say is, many times people will see that there's some company, they just got tons of funding, they're being mentioned in the news, they're going to be this new rocket ship, and lots of people want to go work for this rocket ship. And I can't tell you how many people would try, like in an interview with me, regardless of what company I was at, I'd say, well, why do you want to work here? They're like, oh, I want to be at a rocket ship.
Wrong
Like,
answer.
wrong answer, absolutely wrong answer. But even think about for yourself, even if you thought that was your answer, why would you want the answer?
Yeah, why?
Why? So what I would say is, it is much easier to sell a product and to be able to give the pitch of a company where you're really passionate about what it is that they do. So this is a lot about what I talk about with culture-driven sales, because culture-driven sales is not just about the company being able to emotionally connect with their prospects and their employees, but you want, as your own self, to be able to connect and identify and see that you're going to be impactful, of being able to contribute to whatever company it is, and that you're passionate about what they do. So I think it's really, really important that you're passionate about the mission and vision and the product or service of what the company does. And people are going to be motivated by different areas and different sectors. So that's why you can't just do because your friend likes that. That's the first. The second is, you have a set of core values that are super important to you. And are you working for a company where those core values are valued at that company and they're prioritized at that company? Because if they are prioritizing things that are very different than what you're prioritizing, it might be harder for you to be inspired. Because you not only are going to be successful at a company just because they have a great product and there's a big demand for it, but that it's going to inspire you to get up and want to not only just show up at work, but be able to bring your best self to work every day. So I think that those are really important. But besides that, here are a few other things I would advise everyone to look for. Oftentimes, people are looking for title, dollar amount, level, and all of that, of course, is important. But to me, I think that those are not the most important, because that's not going to be the signal of how successful you're going to be, how fast your career is going to go, or how much money you're going to make based on what you start at. I think it's really important that you work at a company where you, one, are really passionate, two, you know you can learn and grow there. So whatever it is that you want to learn and how you want to develop, there's plenty of opportunity to get that skills and exposure at that company. And three, who are the people that you're working with and who are you working for? So do you have respect and trust and maybe some level of admiration? Can you learn from those folks? So I've always chosen where I've gone based on, am I super passionate about the mission and vision of this company? Is it a place where I think I can learn and grow, but I can also, what I can bring to the table is something that is needed, so I'll be able to have a good impact. And then most importantly, for me, it has always been about the people, and it always will be about the people, because it's people who make the company, it's people who build the company, it's people who you're going to learn from. And so if you say, oh, I don't like the culture here, I've heard that, I don't think I'm going to like these people, but it's a rocket ship and I'm going to make a lot of money, you're just not going to have a great experience. So focus on the people.
Yeah, and especially with sales, because you're gonna have probably more hard days than good days. So you might as well be around good people that are gonna help you grow, help you learn, to your point, that you're inspired by. So it is important to take a step back, even if I would say for the people listening that might not necessarily have a job, maybe you got laid off, maybe you're kind of in this waiting period. I would challenge you, if you can, financially, to really take your time as much as you can to find that good fit that Kelly's talking about. Otherwise, you're going to go jump into a new role too soon, and it's not going to be a good fit, and you might find yourself in the same position. So, awesome advice, Kelly. So as we wrap up here, because I know we're kind of getting close on time, I want to ask you a question about the founders that you've worked with. You've helped a lot of these founders take their dream from maybe a few million to hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue growth with your leadership position. But I'm curious, what makes these founders that you've worked with stand out as far as building pipeline, closing deals, and really be able to execute on some of the things that we're talking about today?
Yeah. Well, a lot of founders, as I had mentioned, people might be involved in doing those calls because they're doing the outreach. But pipeline, early days, it's the responsibility of the founder before there's a team. But I would be hesitant if the companies are being dependent on the founders to
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough.
to the scale.
Good distinction.
But I would say for founders, the founders that I've seen that are just super exceptional is one, they are have a really strong mission and vision as to the why of the company. They understand why does the company exist, and that why. I mean, if people have watched Simon Sinek TED Talks and such that talk about the why matters more than the what and the how. Many companies are just exceptional at communicating the what and the how, but they struggle because people actually buy. Buying is an emotional decision. Even if you're buying for a company, there's still people that are buying. And so you need to understand that why. And I think that the best founders are exceptional at communicating that why, which means that they also are really good and effective at communicating their company story in a way where it emotionally connects with other people. And it connects with their investors, it connects with their prospects, it connects with their customers, but it also connects with their employees, right? So you have to be able to inspire people to believe what you believe. And so one of the things I like to say about being a chief revenue officer or being a president, I think this is true for a CEO as well, is I always talk about you need to be a CBO. And that CBO is a chief belief officer. Because if you can't get people in your company, your employees, to believe that you're actually building something really special that people want to buy. If you can't get your customers to believe in the product and your future and your roadmap, if you can't get your investors to believe that you have something special, then it's going to be very, very hard to do. So I think the best founders are great at creating that belief, communicating the why, and being able to be really compelling storytellers.
Yeah. Ted Lasso would be proud with the chief belief officer moment there.
The funny thing, Will's not here in this office. I have another room that has belief on it, and I've had that for years and years and years. And then
He
Ted
stole
Lasso
it from
has
you.
almost the same belief sign. Which I was like, there's my sign.
They stole it.
Yeah.
They must have been on it. They must have been watching a gong call or something, and like, hey, that would look good in the episode. I don't know. We're gonna take that one.
Exactly.
No, so good. I mean, and that goes for reps too. Like you need to have that belief in showing up. John Kaplan many episodes ago that we had him on, he talks about this notion of waking up and believing in what you do matters, what you sell matters, the transformation that your product can bring to the companies and organizations. And if you don't actually believe that, you're going to have a really tough time selling it. You're going to have a tough time conveying the transformation that could come with that sale. So such a good point. I love that you brought that up.
And so you actually just reinforced something we talked about a few minutes ago.
Yeah.
About when someone's looking for their next career opportunity and company, why it is so important that you can identify with the company's story, with the mission, the vision, or with the space that company is. Because if you don't believe and you don't care deeply about it, how effective are you going to be to communicate and convince other people to buy it? It's just not going to work. So it's
It,
important not only for you to
yeah.
be motivated, but it's critical for you to be able to be effective at your job of selling it.
100%. You can say all the right words, but people on the other side of the screen or other side of the room, the table, they can feel what you're saying, whether or not it's authentic and believable. So, Kelly, as we wrap up before the final two questions, I'm curious if there's anything you want to double down on, anything you want to make sure that you mention before we finish off with the last couple questions.
Well, I think there's one thing that I always say on every podcast. We talked about this a little bit, but whether you're talking about what company to work for or how to focus on good culture in the team, I'll just reiterate, I said this a little bit before, but it really all comes down to people. So,
Hmm.
of course, like you asked what kind of founders are most effective. People have to have a lot of operational effectiveness. They have to know their business. There's a whole bunch of things that clearly people need to know how to do. But in the end, if you have the right product in the right space at the right time, you have all the right operational chops, but you have the wrong people, that's not going to work. So I think it's important for all of us to realize like it's people who build products and services. It's people who communicate with prospects and customers. It's people who provide customer service. It's people who hire other people and people who manage and train and enable those people. It's people who make decisions. So if you're surrounded and by the right people and you have the right people on your team, then you have a lot that's going for you. Sorry, that was my dog.
I didn't hear it.
But if you don't focus on always having the right people, then priorities can get messed up
Yeah.
into a different area. So I think it is really critical to be thinking about not only how are you putting in a place where the right people, but how are you? Whether you're an individual contributor, you're an SDR, you're a sales rep, you're a manager, what are you doing and how are you showing up yourself every day to help create that positive people experience where people are going to do better and see you as a positive asset of bringing energy and bringing positivity. Everything doesn't always have to be positive, but how are you going to be helping to contribute more to the whole? And so I
Yeah.
think you should be thinking about joining companies that have the right people, but then also how are you showing up yourself to be an asset to the people and the culture of everyone that's around you, whether they're other employees and customers.
Yeah. So well said. I love that. I love that, Kelly. So last, second to last question here. I know I keep, teasing it out when we're going to end, but I don't want it to end. So I wish we could keep going. Any resources that you'd recommend the listeners to check out, whether that's culture driven sales, any other work that you've done, podcasts, books, any recommendations that people can dig into after this podcast?
Sure. Well, definitely please come connect with me on LinkedIn. Go check out my website at culturedrivensales.com. There's lots of podcasts, there's speaking clips, there are a whole slew of articles that are there. A lot are more talking about what are the elements and ingredients of high performance sales teams and high performance reps, how you can be a better storyteller, how you can build high performance teams, how to get the right growth rate at your company, all that kind of stuff. So go check out culturedrivensales.com. I also teach a course on it, so there's some information about how I teach this course and some of the principles that are there.
I love it. Thank you for that. All right, Kelly, you've given us so many good ingredients, we'll say, into this next question, but curious how you'd wrap it all up and define an elite seller.
Mm. Well, I wrote an article on what are the top characteristics of a great salesperson. And on that, there are 20 characteristics. So I won't go through all of those, but people can take a look at
Read
that.
the article.
Yeah, read the article. But I will say there's a few key things that I would put on there. The first is everything that has to do with being an effective communicator is really important. Are people compelling storytellers? Are they an empathetic communicator? Are they a good listener? So being a good communicator is critical to being a good salesperson and being a good manager and being a good employee and whatever you do. So I think that's the first. The second is, especially in sales, people have to know how to take risks, but be able to do that in a way where you can be resilient and learn from failure. Sometimes people don't like failure, and so they won't take the risks. That's why you have the people that are going to do hours and hours and hours of research before they reach out for the call because they don't want to fail. So you can't be afraid of failure. You just have to go for it. Take the risks, raise your hand, do things that you haven't done before, push your comfort zone, and then know it's not always going to work out, but that's how you learn and grow. So that's the second. Related to having a growth mindset is really important. Best salespeople, best people in their career are going to have a growth mindset. And I think that the third is people have to be, especially in sales, but in everything, they have to be a good human and have to have a big heart. Like the best salespeople are those that can emotionally connect with other people. They show some vulnerability. They're empathetic. They're passionate. But the reason they're good at establishing relationships is they care. They have a really big heart. And so I think that the best characteristics of being an elite seller, it's not the pompous, egocentric, super aggressive stereotypes that you see on all those sales movies and such. It is the people who are going to actually take the time, who really care, and who lead with heart first.
So good. I am going to listen to this several times. I've got a bunch of notes here. I'm sure the listeners do too. Kelly, thanks for joining us on today's episode. It was so good.
It was fun. It was fun. Looking forward to connecting with many of you, and thank you so much for having me.